This portion of the John Fredericks Show is brought to you by Hargrave Military Academy. Attend an educational and informative open house event at Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. For more information, visit online at hargrave.edu. Hargrave Military Academy. Build his future.
Joining us now live from New York, back from a time in Paris, from the front lines of France, is our very own Dr. Pamela Falk. She is the senior CBS News correspondent covering the UN. Dr. Falk, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. Well, I can tell you the French are as on board on Syria as the United States on doing something about this latest chemical weapons attack. That I can tell you. And the UK. The UK now, the headline this morning, very early because it's Britain time, that the UK is going to propose a Chapter 7, which means use of force resolution to the P5. That's just the permanent 5 members of the Security Council authorizing the use of force. Now, no reason Russia's on board. Russia's been digging its heels in, but I think they're calling Russia out.
For what? Saying what? I mean, what do they expect the Russians to do? Say, yes, I authorize the bombing of my ally? I mean, what? How's that work?
Yeah, well, it may be. I think they're banking on the fact that at some point, Russia, which their foreign minister Lavrov said that if the Syrians use their chemical weapons against people, they might be willing to pull out their support. And I think the UK's idea is this is that moment. There's at least by the U.S., France, and the UK, and perhaps Israel intelligence, even though the UN hasn't delivered any report yet, that the Assad government was behind this awful gassing of children and civilians this past week. And so they're ready to say this is the moment for a UN resolution like there was in Libya, like there was before. And so the idea would be to see if they could call out Russia and get Russia on board because Assad may fall. But, you know, it could go either way at this point.
Dr. Falk, let me ask you this. I think this is the key question here. So it appears now the evidence seems to be mounting that there's no doubt in some people's minds that the Assad government was behind the deployment of these chemical weapons in Damascus. One of the questions, though, that we're asking is what exactly was the objective of this? I mean, it had gave very little military advantage to Assad, and now he's inviting the wrath of the organized free world on his doorstep. What would have been the military rationale for this, you think?
Well, John, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that Assad's fighting for his life, and this is his Alawite Shia revolution going down. And so they saw the Syrian Free Army, the rebels, coming from both sides of Damascus, really cornering him. And a cornered rat does these kind of things. And that's what, that's the general thinking, is that he really felt threatened in Damascus itself. That was one. Number two is that he has successfully, for a year now, pointed the finger at the rebels for the chemical weapons attacks. And it was Syria, the Syrian ambassador, Assad's ambassador, who proposed that the UN go in and inspect these chemical weapons sites. It's very cynical, and the idea was, we'll show you, it's the terrorists. And they haven't let the weapons inspectors in. They're in there right now. Ake Selstrom, who's a Swedish weapons inspector, and Angela Kane, who's the UN disarmament chief, and they let them in. And then there were sniper attacks on them, and so they don't get in. And by the time sarin gas degrades, they might let them in. And so they're still saying it's the opposition. Now, remember, this is not a pretty picture of what's going on there. It's basically, I don't want to be extreme about it, but it's a world war. It's a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union. And who's in there? The U.S., Soviet Union, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Lebanon, Iran, the Al-Qaeda, to add a non-state actor. So every nation in the region, and of course Israel's being affected, Turkey's being affected, Iraq is falling apart because of the Sunni Shia fighting as a result of Syria, in addition to other things. But the Al-Qaeda has grown, and so you've got this war to the finish. And so my question, which I can't answer, is what's the end game? You take Assad out, who comes in?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's, I think, the question on everybody's mind. What's the end game? What's the objective? And what does a strike of some kind accomplish? Dr. Falk, that's the key question. What is the objective and what's the end game? So when the United Kingdom says, look, we're going to do a Charter 7 and try to get involved here, what does involved mean? I mean, if we strike with missiles...
Well, it could be like there was in Libya, where the entire world, let's say, it's not going to happen, but let's say Russia has said Assad's going down. They don't want to be boxed out as they were in Libya for the next government, because they have oil, because they have military bases. This is the Middle East. This is Russia's last stand in the Middle East. And so they want in on the next round, whoever comes in. And so they go along. Let's say they do, and then there's a multinational force which U.S. leads from behind, and the French go in, and a lot of different air forces and warships come in. Now, the U.S. Navy right now has the Sixth Fleet with 4 warships in the Eastern Mediterranean waiting President Obama's order with Tomahawk missiles on board. The Royal Navy is in the Mediterranean as well. They're ready to strike. And so their threat is if we'll go in with the UN or without it. And that may convince Russia to go on board. If they go in, then let's say they take out Assad, or they degrade his capability and the Syrian Free Army comes in. One would hope that the opposition and the president of which is this Jarba, who came to New York and went to Washington, very moderate group. But they've been backed for 6 months by Al-Qaeda on the military front. Now they're sort of fighting Al-Qaeda a little bit. There's a lot of internecine battles going on because they see some kind of overthrow happening. But Al-Qaeda's, really strong there. Hezbollah came in on the Assad side. They're not going to retreat immediately. The Chechens are there. There's so many Iranian national, the special SWAT team forces are there. And so what do you do when there's a new government in and you've got chaos? The smart money would be to put more effort into rebuilding. But to rebuild a government, we've seen in Iraq, we've seen in Afghanistan, is no easy work in the Middle East when this has gotten so bad that there are 4 million refugees spilling into every neighboring country and creating chaos. There's no way to get food to everyone.
Right. Well, look, Dr. Falk, you just hit the nail. It isn't, and you hit the nail right on the head, and it's the question that's got to be asked, which is what is the end game? And if indeed we get involved and the Assad government is toppled, no one has any idea what that means, and so it could be worse. It could, and that's the other thing that's hard to fathom right now is that if we were to go in there and get involved in some kind of a military action, whatever that may be, de facto, we're going to be fighting side by side troops from Al-Qaeda. It doesn't make any sense.
I know, it's wild. Now, as Galileo once, I can sell it round or sell it flat. The other side of it is you've got 4 million women and children fleeing the country, chemical weapons coming in. And what is the international community going to say? We're not going to the world won't do anything when you see these unbelievably just obscene images of children dying, gasping for breath from sarin gas. You're not do nothing? It's sort of very little and very late, but can the world sit by and be judged harshly in history for doing nothing when this is happening? So it's I can tell you both sides of this one, but it's not pretty. It's just very difficult right now because it's gotten so international.
Yes. I mean, this is, as you pointed out, this isn't just an internal conflict now. There's so many proxies on every side of the equation. You can't figure it out. I guess, our concern is certainly anytime there's this kind of suffering and horrific carnage. I mean, there's that knee-jerk reaction that the U.S. has to do something and get involved. My question is, I don't know what get involved means. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't think we have any national or strategic interest there whatsoever. And as horrible as it is, this country is $17 trillion in debt. We've already been through 2 of these conflicts. They're going nowhere. I don't want to see another United States man or woman coming home in a body bag or without legs. And once you get involved in this stuff, you can't get out. That's the problem.
Well, John, no, you're always brilliant on these things, and you're on the money. But now it's a breeding ground for every terrorist who want to attack the United States. I mean, that's why, to some extent, I believe the rationale that Russia says what happens after Assad.
Right.
And so now what do you have? You have this breeding ground. It's on Israel's border. Iran is in the battle. Iran's developing nuclear weapons. Very little question about that. And throw a nuclear weapon in 6 months when Iran has one. And you've got Israel, Turkey, a NATO ally. I mean, you've got Jordan. I mean, you've got all these countries and Iraq that are getting the brunt of this. The U.S. does have interest in making sure it doesn't get worse. So the options are really tough. The White House is now operating not with a lot of congressional approval. I mean, Congress hasn't. I mean, they've consulted with some members of Congress, but Congress is out, and a lot of congressional members feel like this is something that should be supported by the U.S. Congress. Certainly, David Cameron in the UK is waiting until Thursday so he can talk to his parliament. And Congress is feeling like maybe it's right, but let's talk about it.
Look, a unilateral action here by the president, I think, is an absolute mistake. We have no strategic interest at stake in Syria. I get the international entanglement and involvement and the chess game and the proxies, but we have no strategic interest at stake. There is not a national security interest for the United States where they pose us no risk. We have no alliances there. We have nothing. And so, and I'm going to go back to our senator in Virginia, freshman, Tim Kaine, a Democrat, basically tries to back Obama on, things that he thinks make sense. And he came out the other day. We're having him on our show on Tuesday and said, look, there should be no action by the U.S. in any way militarily absent of congressional authority, consultation, and approval. I think that's kind of where we are in this. Look, here's the problem, Dr. Falk. We've been down this path several times. Exactly. A lot of us went lock, stock, and barrel with it. You want to try to understand the international implications. We all heard the, let freedom ring, all that nonsense.
On Iraq, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and many of us, like
and
myself.
Libya.
That's right. That's
look
right.
At Benghazi.
And we don't want to lead from behind. And, all this stuff, that we got all the buzzwords out there. At the end of the day, we have we're no better off. There's actually, somebody could actually make the argument. I'm not, but you could make the argument and say, exactly how would we be worse off today if Saddam Hussein was still in the leadership in Iraq? That's an interesting question that's going to be tough to answer because, the Iraqi people might be better off, but how is the U.S. better off? Tough one. That's the problem.
It's the whole situation is very tough, and the timetable is short because President Obama goes to Russia for the G20 meeting. I mean, you're not bombing a country's ally where Russia is supporting the Assad regime and just going and hobnobbing at the G20. So we're talking about a time frame that's either a week or it's going to be put off.
It is, and my final thought here, Dr. Falk, is, look, I'm going to make an analogy. Getting involved in Syria in any way is like the Roach Motel. Once you get in, you can't get out. That's my fear of this thing. So that's my analogy for the day. Dr. Falk, we're out of time. This is the John Fredericks Show.